The transport shuttle lurched violently as it cut through the upper atmosphere of Cirrus Ivy, bucking and tilting like some drunken cadet trying to salute. Commander Eric Vaynar tightened his grip on the harness straps across his chest, wearing the long-suffering expression of a man who had outlasted far too many attempts by the universe to kill him. He barely flinched when the cabin lights flickered, or when the fuselage groaned under the pressure. To Eric, this was just another day in a career built on dodging cosmic disasters. The pilot, a jittery youth who looked like he still called his mother on subspace, shouted back over the noise of straining engines. "Sir, electromagnetic interference is chewing up the NAV systems. I can barely keep us stable." His voice cracked mid-word, betraying his inexperience. "That's what happens when someone plants an outpost next to a nebula that looks like spilled wine across half the galaxy," Eric muttered, eyes narrowing as he studied the crimson tendrils of energy writhing in the skies above. "Just aim for the metal structures sticking out of the ground and try not to hit them. Shouldn't be too hard." The shuttle shuddered again before slamming onto the landing pad with all the grace of a falling anvil. From the window, the outpost emerged from the haze, a jagged fortress of steel and armored plating, built with no concern for beauty, only survival. "Welcome to paradise," Eric grumbled, releasing his harness and grabbing his duffel. The airlock hissed open with a sound like a disappointed sigh, and the commander stepped onto the pad. The atmosphere tasted metallic, tinged with ozone, and something else that gnawed at his teeth. Overhead, the nebula pulsed like a great crimson heart, bathing the world in unending twilight. Waiting at the entrance was Lieutenant Rin Holden, his uniform immaculate but his eyes bloodshot, carrying the look of a man who had been running on caffeine and nerves for weeks. "Commander Vaynar, thank God you're here," Holden said quickly, falling into step beside him. "We've got a situation. Been keeping everyone on edge for nearly a month now." Eric raised a brow. "Well, when someone tells me I'll need my sense of humor, it usually means I'm about to deal with something insane, or something trying to kill me. Sometimes both." Inside, the outpost was a labyrinth of gray corridors, sterile lights, and reinforced plating. But Eric noticed the tension immediately, technicians rushing with erratic urgency, repair drones spinning in circles as if confused, and maintenance crews digging into walls that should have been stable. He sidestepped one drone that nearly clipped his boot. "Let me guess. Your mysterious guest downstairs is throwing off an electromagnetic field strong enough to fry half your equipment." Holden stopped mid-stride. "How did you know that?" Eric shrugged. 20 years of service, Rin. Patterns repeat. And that repair drone just tried to romance my footwear. Dead giveaway. The descent toward the detention level was worse. Lights flickered in rhythms that almost felt intentional. Eric's wristwatch stopped ticking. His communicator gave out a pathetic warble like a dying bird. By the time they reached the security checkpoint, nothing electronic seemed reliable. "She's been difficult," Holden admitted, nodding to the final cell. Designation Leora. Claims to be a reconnaissance officer for some empire called the Ethereal Dominion. Xenobiology insists it doesn't exist. But, well, you'll see. They approached the reinforced glass of the observation chamber. Inside sat Leora. She was cross-legged, utterly still, as though meditating in a temple rather than a prison cell. Her skin glowed faintly red, pulsing with an inner light that ebbed in rhythm with the equipment failing around her. Long white hair cascaded over her shoulders, gleaming like threads of starlight, and the elegant points of her ears marked her as undeniably non-human. The moment her eyes opened, luminous, sharp, unsettling, Eric felt a jolt run through him like a static discharge. "Commander Eric Vaynar," she said smoothly, her voice carrying through malfunctioning speakers with crystal clarity. "I was beginning to think you'd gotten lost." Holden fumbled his datapad. It sparked, smoked, and died in his hands. "How does she know your name?" he hissed. "We've swept this place for bugs 6 times. "Maybe she's psychic," Eric replied dryly. "Or maybe she just overheard us in the hallway. Sound does travel." I'm neither, Leora said, standing gracefully. The faint glow along her skin brightened. I simply know things. Like the fact that you are here because your superiors can't decide whether I'm more dangerous as an enemy, or as an ally. Eric studied her with reluctant fascination. Every piece of equipment in the chamber seemed to bend, flicker, or die in her presence. And yet, she moved with elegance, her red skin and white hair catching the ambient light like a living flame. Well, he said at last, cracking a faint smile, that certainly narrows it down. You're just like everyone else I've ever met in this line of work. The cell lights guttered, and the hum of the containment field trembled under her proximity. Halden muttered a curse under his breath. Eric only leaned closer, curiosity outweighing caution. For better or worse, the game had begun. The corridors leading away from Leora's cell groaned with static tension, every panel crackling faintly as though the entire facility were struggling to breathe. Commander Eric Vaynar lingered at the edge of the glass, his hands folded behind his back, watching the strange woman inside. Her presence radiated unease. Yet for all the havoc she caused, there was a steadiness in her bearing, like she belonged here more than the outpost itself. Lieutenant Rin Halden shifted anxiously at his side. Sir, with respect, we need to keep our distance. The engineering crews are already whispering this place is haunted. Power reroutes, drones going haywire, scanners refusing to read biometrics. 3 weeks of this, and morale's bleeding out. Eric smirked faintly. If the outpost ghosts are polite enough to ask for me by name, I think we should at least hear them out. Halden's jaw tightened. She's not a ghost, Commander. She's a hazard. Most hazards I've met can't hold eye contact like that without flinching, Eric muttered, stepping forward toward the flickering control panel. Inside the cell, Leora tilted her head. Her white hair caught the dim light like liquid silver, her crimson skin pulsing faintly with energy. You're curious, she said, her voice low but perfectly audible. You wonder whether I am a threat to your kind, or something far worse. Depends on what you mean by worse, Eric replied, hands clasped casually behind his back. I've seen crystalline entities that communicate through interpretive dance. Hard to top that on the scale of unusual. Leora's lips curved ever so slightly. Worse because I am not here by chance. Worse because your survival may already be entangled with mine. The word, entangled, set Halden stiff as a rail. Commander, we need to contact command. Temporal mechanics, quantum anomalies, this is above clearance. Everything's above your clearance, Eric murmured, still staring at her. That's why they pay me to decide whether we're doomed or not. The containment field flickered as if in response to her mood. Leora stepped closer, and sparks leapt across the seams of the glass. You should not touch me, she warned suddenly, her earlier poise cracking. Her white hair shimmered, strands rising slightly as though tugged by invisible static. If you do, you risk more than your life. Eric raised a brow. That sounds like the kind of thing that only makes people want to touch you more. Her eyes narrowed, the glow in them sharp enough to pierce. Not in this timeline, she whispered. The words hung between them like an unspoken threat. Halden's breath caught, a strangled sound escaping his throat. Timeline? No. Absolutely not. Commander, I'm begging you, this isn't protocol anymore, this is madness. But Eric wasn't listening to him. He was locked on Leora, sensing layers in her warning that went beyond theatrics. She drew back, her hands open, palms faintly sparking. You carry a pattern in your mind, she said slowly, her tone shifting into something almost reverent. One my people have been searching for generations. Your neural pathways resonate with the Crimson Nebula's core consciousness. It has already chosen you. Eric's smirk faltered, just slightly. He remembered restless nights in orbit, dreams that pulsed with crimson light, thoughts that didn't feel like his own. He had ignored them, soldiers always ignored the creeping edges of impossible truths. But now, staring at this red-skinned, white-haired stranger, he felt that tickle at the back of his mind again, like the whisper of a nebula calling his name. Wonderful, he muttered, forcing levity. So not only am I a commander, I'm apparently a cosmic chosen one. That'll look fantastic on my service record. Before Holden could protest again, an alarm cut through the facility, low, resonant, urgent. The tone carried a rhythm every soldier knew by heart. External threat alert. Holden's eyes went wide as his datapad briefly flickered to life, then sputtered again. Sir, incoming ships. Configuration unknown. ETA 4 hours. Leora stood frozen in her cell, her glow brightening until the walls themselves hummed. It cannot be my people, she said quietly. They do not know where I am. Which means, either yours, or them. Eric's voice sharpened. Them. Her eyes shifted, darkened, the glow of her skin flaring like heated metal. The Devourers. Techno-organic entities that consume energy, electromagnetic, quantum, technological. They've been tracking the nebula's signals, just as my people have. If they have found you, this station will not survive first contact. Holden's face drained of color. They eat technology. They seduce it, Leora corrected, her voice taut with urgency. They sing to your machines. They make your systems betray you long before their ships arrive. As if on cue, the lights above them flickered, hummed, and shifted into a strange rhythmic strobe, almost like notes in a song. Consoles buzzed with ghostly tones. Eric glanced upward, his jaw tightening. Well, he muttered, there goes the neighborhood. Holden nearly shouted, his voice cracking. Sir, we must evacuate. We can't face this kind of enemy. With what communications? Eric shot back, gesturing at the dying consoles. We're cut off, outgunned, and sitting inside a metal coffin. Unless, his eyes flicked back to Leora, who now stood at the heart of her cell, her glow pulsing in rhythm with the failing systems. You want to release me, she said. It wasn't a question. Eric's smirk returned, thinner now, sharpened by tension. The thought had occurred to me. You're the only thing that's broken every piece of equipment here without even trying. Seems like you might be exactly what we need against techno-organic space vampires. Her expression tightened. You don't understand. If you touch me, your quantum pattern could fuse with mine. It could kill us both. Or worse, bind us together permanently, mind to mind, through the nebula's matrix. Eric took a step closer to the panel, ignoring Holden's strangled gasp. Permanent consciousness sharing. Honestly, after 20 years of military service, that almost sounds like an upgrade. The alarm's pitch changed again, faster, sharper. The countdown had begun. And somewhere in the crimson skies above, the hunters were coming. They opened the cell on a manual that squealed like a thing exhausted from too much pessimism, and when the heavy door ground inward, Eric could feel the shift in the room like a held breath finally released. Emergency lights from the corridor painted Leora's red skin in a softer, more honest hue, her white hair fell around her shoulders like a halo gone dangerous. For a moment, the outpost's broken machines were merely background noise, sparks falling in a slow rain, consoles coughing, drones twitching, while the three of them considered what came next. Move with me, Eric said, not as an order but as an invitation. He kept his voice even, the practiced cadence of someone used to giving direction when things were collapsing around him. Holden hovered behind, every metabolite of his training snapping taut. He clutched a datapad as if it were a rosary. Leora's eyes studied him. You do not release prisoners lightly, she observed. You release assets when a greater danger approaches. Her lips twitched, but there was no mirth behind it, only a measured assessment. You have chosen pragmatism over comfort. Eric gave that small smile he kept for briefings and funerals. Comfort has been AWOL for most of my career. He let Holden lead the way as they moved into the bowels of the outpost, toward the main core where the failing systems mumbled in languages they no longer spoke. The corridor walls had been stripped bare in places, protective panels removed by crews chasing ghosts of faults. The sound of their footsteps echoed like a metronome keeping time with the building dread. As they reached the command elevator, the environment responded to Leora's presence, less chaotic, more deliberate. Her aura seemed to dampen some of the random noise while amplifying others, like a musician tuning an instrument by ear. Halden's skepticism was audible. "If she's trying to help, why has she been causing failures for weeks?" he demanded, voice low. "Because your systems tried to court her," Leora answered simply. "They sent packages of protocol and handshake requests that meant nothing to me. They tapped, probed, tried to negotiate through their own flawed security." Her tone sharpened. "It is like shouting into a canyon and expecting the canyon to answer with a sonnet. They responded the only way the canyon knows, with echoes that broke things. They rode the lift upward in a silence that tasted of static." The elevator's diagnostic display pulsed alive when Leora touched it, the dead text resolving into a coherent stream. One by one, failing nodes along the lift's path responded, lingering microbursts that settled into a steadier hum. When the doors opened to the command level, Eric felt it as a tangible easing of strain, as if a tightly wound cable had been given permission to relax. But the command center was not a place for easy atmospheres. Screens flickered through spectral notations, tactical maps were half music score and half star chart, and the Devourer song, an alien, beautiful, corrosive melody, still threaded through the speakers like an invasive vine. Officers moved faster than they had the right to, shouting corrections and improvisations. Lieutenant Celis Kale, formerly Chen, looked up, eyes rimmed in exhausted white. "They've dropped out of transit," she reported. "They're in system and starting their approach vector." "Can you jam them?" Eric asked, blunt as ever. "Or at least scramble their broadcast?" Celis's laugh was brittle. "With what? Our jammers think they're composing a fugue. Our comm arrays are trying to harmonize with the signal. We can't even keep a basic feed stable." Her fingers danced across a console and everything answered with a new tremor. Unless, she glanced at Leora, the question clear in the little lift of her chin. Leora stepped forward and placed her hand over the main core interface like an offering. The effect was immediate and strangely intimate. The mainframe surrendered privacy in the way a weary person might confide. Leora's bioelectric field probed protocols and safety gates, and she exhaled with a sound Eric almost thought he could map to an electrical waveform. Systems that had been on the verge of epileptic collapse steadied, the outpost's core began speaking in one voice rather than a choir of confused static. "That's impressive," Halden breathed, relief braided with wariness. "What's the catch?" "You will have side effects," Leora warned. "I do not think in tiers of permission and user groups. I speak in access and channels. When I remove the bureaucratic limits and safety locks, your systems perform at the raw level they were designed for, without the dampers your engineers put in place to prevent misuse." She turned to Eric. "Your people coded restraint for reasons that made sense when they thought their tools were sacred. When I tune them, the tools become instruments. Instruments can play both symphonies and thunder." Eric's laugh was quiet. "So we trade safety for performance. Not the worst bargain I've made." He watched as drones halted their confused spirals and resumed purposeful operations, as turrets that had keyed off failure modes recalibrated and lined up toward potential approach vectors. Where there had been a staccato of sparks, the command center now thrummed with coordinated function. Still, the improvements were not without cost. Some subsystems, those with ancient, fragile safety nets, roared when unshackled and briefly overloaded like athletes pushed beyond conditioning. A power conduit spiked and blew a fuse with a soft pop that sent a technician ducking for cover. An old drone, freed of a century-stitched braking routine, hummed a little too loudly and flung itself against a maintenance rack. Eric saw the trade-offs in real time and did not flinch away from them. "Acceptable," he said finally. "If it gives us an edge against whatever's coming, we adapt." Leora's expression shifted. I can feed the main core a counter-harmony. I can tune your arrays so that they do not hear the Devourer song as a seduction, but as noise. She closed her eyes for a moment, and the room stilled as if the field around her took a breath. But to do that, I will need more direct access to your systems, and someone must protect me while I interface. The Devourer's signal is getting stronger, every minute it pulses, it eats at the edges of your hardware. Eric found himself nodding. You'll have it. Halden, coordinate a perimeter with what we've got. Deploy the drones to layered patterns, don't let them approach en masse. Celis, disconnect redundant external arrays and reroute the core through Leora's interface. Orders flew out of him with an ease born of long practice. The officers reacted like trained instruments, readiness is a contagion. As Leora sank deeper into the system, she hummed with concentration. Her fingers moved on composite overlays that now flickered with streams of pure data. Where she touched, security protocols unlatched and reformed into defensive harmonics. The outpost's once dysfunctional turrets sang back at the incoming frequencies with a counterwave that made the Devourer song stutter like a throat cleared of a spell. For all that Eric saw in those moments. Machines springing into life, tactics rearranged on the fly, there remained a personal tension. Halden watched Leora with an intensity that bordered on suspicion, as if any second she might pivot the outpost into debris. Celis glanced at Eric with a look that asked silently how far they were willing to go. Tell me again why we freed her, Halden muttered under his breath, though Eric heard him. Because when you stand at the edge of extinction, Eric replied softly, you stop keeping your enemies in neat boxes. You take chances. He watched Leora as she coaxed the outpost into singing back at the Devourers, and somewhere behind the technical victory was a quieter worry, that the same gift making them whole was also the thing that, left unchecked, could unravel them again. Outside, the Devourer fleet curved nearer through the crimson haze, bioluminescent forms undulating like living dreadnoughts. The harmonic interference from their approach washed the outpost's hull in a slow, terrible cadence. Inside, within the newly synchronized core, Leora adjusted the counter-harmony with the delicate care of a musician coaxing a final, defiant note into being. Eric felt a pulse of hope, sharp, precarious, and entirely human. They had bought themselves time. They had made an ally of a former prisoner. It was the sort of gamble that either saved lives or bought legends. Either way, there was no stepping back now. The command center was bathed in crimson light, both from the nebula outside and from the unnatural glow of the Devourer fleet drawing closer. Screens no longer displayed neat vectors or clean diagnostics. Instead, they pulsed with strange, organic-looking notations. Musical scores written in alien harmonics, as if the machines themselves were translating data into melody. Lieutenant Celis Kale pressed her palms flat against her console. Sir, they're accelerating. Contact in 30 minutes. Anne, her voice cracked. They're singing louder. Our systems are, listening. Indeed, the walls seemed to hum with resonance, and Eric could feel it in his chest like the bassline of a song he had never wanted to hear. The Devourers weren't just attacking, they were rewriting. Leora stood at the central interface, her red skin glowing brighter, her white hair lifting as though caught in a phantom current. She moved like a conductor before an orchestra, coaxing the outpost's defenses to answer with their own counter-harmony. For a moment, the two songs collided, and the command center itself vibrated with the strain. Eric stepped to her side. You said we'd need more than noise to stop them. What did you mean? Her luminous eyes flicked toward him, and in that instant, he felt heat ripple across his skin, as if her energy field brushed against his. The nebula is not just a storm, she said. It is a guardian. My people studied it for generations, but we never understood its key. Until I met you. Halden made a strangled sound. Commander, don't listen, this is metaphysics, madness. Quiet, Eric cut him off sharply. Go on. You are quantum entangled, Leora said, her voice steady despite the chaos. Your neural pathways resonate with the nebula's core consciousness. When I link with your mind, we can awaken it. Together. Alone, I destabilize your machines. Together, we can make them whole. Eric gave a lopsided grin that didn't hide the pounding in his chest. And the risk? Her lips parted. Catastrophic. It could kill us both instantly. Or, she hesitated. Or it could bind us permanently, thought to thought, memory to memory. No barriers, no secrets. We would never be alone again. Halden stepped forward, panicked. Sir, this is insane. We can evacuate. We can hide. Eric didn't move his eyes from Leora. I've spent my whole life with the odds against me, Rin. If the universe wants to give me a partner to fight back with, I'll take it. He reached out, his hand covering hers on the control panel. The instant their skin touched, the world erupted. Light. Sound. Memories not his own. He saw through her eyes, red skies over alien cities, luminous beings bound by energy fields, the loneliness of reconnaissance in hostile space. And she, in turn, drowned in his recollections, soldiers laughing in the mess hall, the grief of lost comrades, the dry humor he wielded against despair. Their thoughts fused into harmony, like two instruments suddenly tuned to the same pitch. The outpost shuddered and then steadied, as if the machines themselves had been waiting for this chord to be struck. The Devourer's song wailed louder, invasive and hypnotic. But now the outpost answered, not with chaos, but with unity. Systems that had never worked in perfect synchronization suddenly did. Weapons aligned as one, defense grids sang back with discordant defiance. The seduction of the Devourer harmonics was met with a wall of resistance that transformed melody into noise. They can't adapt, Eric whispered, though his voice now carried the undertone of Leora's thoughts. Their whole strategy depends on breaking isolated systems. But we are no longer isolated. Through the viewports, the alien fleet hesitated. Their bioluminescent hulls flickered, their formations wavered. Some peeled away, recoiling as if burned by the counter-harmony. The nebula is waking, Leora said, not aloud, but inside his mind, a thought that resonated through him as clearly as speech. Outside, the vast crimson cloud began to pulse rhythmically, its tendrils of energy curling inward, coalescing. Then, in a blinding surge, a barrier unfolded, a shimmering quantum veil stretching across the system. The Devourer ships slammed against it like waves on stone, their songs breaking apart into dissonant fragments. Celis gasped. Sir, they're retreating. They're actually pulling back. Halden stood frozen, paper notes trembling in his hands. Impossible. No, Eric corrected, his voice carrying both his steadiness and Leora's conviction. Inevitable. This nebula was waiting for us. For this. The fleet dissolved into the darkness beyond, their retreat scattered and disorganized. Within the barrier, the outpost hummed with newfound life, every console aligned, every drone purposeful, every system in harmony. When the surge finally ebbed, Eric staggered, his hands still pressed against Leora's. They did not let go. Could not. The connection remained, a tether of thought and feeling, not overwhelming, but present. You're in my head, he said softly. And you in mine, she replied, with something like a smile. Not complete fusion. More like, empathy, sharpened. Eric chuckled, weary but alive. Guess we'll have to learn to share. Months later, on the observation deck of the newly built Joint Research Station, Eric looked out at the nebula, now calm, its crimson glow protective rather than menacing. Ships of both human fleets and Leora's people moved in careful tandem, building colonies and research posts under the nebula's watchful veil. Leora joined him, her white hair catching the soft light, her crimson skin glowing faintly as ever. Any regrets, Commander? Only that I didn't touch you sooner, he answered, eyes still on the view. Then, with a crooked smile, and maybe that you now know exactly how bad my jokes are. Your humor is terrible, she replied. But her thought brushed his gently, carrying warmth. That's why it works. Together, they stood beneath the eternal dance of the nebula, a guardian, a barrier, a reminder that even in the vast, indifferent galaxy, some connections were worth the risk. And so, the story of Commander Eric Vaynar and Leora comes to a pause, but not an ending. Their bond. An unplanned fusion of human stubbornness and alien resilience, became the bridge between civilizations, the catalyst for survival, and a promise that unity is stronger than fear. The Crimson Nebula, once a mystery, revealed its purpose not as a weapon, but as a guardian, waiting for the moment when two minds, from two species, would dare to touch. In their harmony, an entire sector found protection against the devourers, and in their shared thoughts, humanity discovered the beginnings of trust with the unknown. This was never a story about conquest. It was about connection, the kind that frightens us, because it means surrendering pieces of ourselves, and the kind that saves us, because it gives back more than it takes. Eric and Leora could never return to who they were before, but perhaps that was the point. The galaxy doesn't ask us to remain unchanged. It asks us to adapt, to share, to leap even when we don't know the landing. If you've made it this far into their journey, thank you. Stories like this aren't just about battles or strange technology, they're about the choices that matter, trust, risk, and reaching across divides. If you enjoyed this tale, help us continue sharing more adventures among the stars. Please subscribe to this channel so you won't miss the next journey. Drop a like if you found yourself pulled into the Crimson Nebula. And don't forget to share this video with friends who dream of galaxies far beyond our own. Because in the end, stories, like connections, are stronger when we spread them.